Tēnā koutou and welcome to the MPR and Manawatū Standard By-Election special series. We have senior reporter from Manawatū Standard Jimmy Ellingham to my left, and I am Fraser Gregg. In this series in Hancock Community House, we will be interviewing the candidates in the Palmerston North City Council by-election, the hopefuls vying for the seat left vacant by Tangi Utikere. In this episode, we have Vanesa Rozenberg. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You are first-time candidate for any election?
I am, yes. Yeah.
And you have got the Green Party endorsement.
Correct, I have.
So have you been a long-time Green Party member?
Long-time Green Party member, supporter, recent member coming up from the general election, been involved in the campaign team through there, really got involved in council stuff through there. Yeah.
Cool. It must feel good to have the endorsement of a political party. I guess they're offering you quite a bit of support.
A lot of knowledge and support through there, people to draw knowledge from, reach out to for support. Yeah.
Do we need, though, a third Green Party councillor? It starts to feel a little bit like a coup or a takeover at that stage.
I don't think it's a coup or a takeover in any sort of way. I don't think it's about taking over. I think it's about having some people who are clearly identifying where our values sit.
There is that justification that it's about putting your colours on the mast, knowing where you stand. But there is also a concern around party politics getting into local government. What sort of assurances can you make that that's, I assume, not the case?
That absolutely not the case. Aside from clearly identifying where my policies stand, that's about where it stops.
Fair enough. Your campaign is, I'll be honest, blissfully simple. You're standing on pretty clear issues, and all of them really are pretty obvious coming from a Green Party perspective, but also relevant in particular to Palmerston North. And I'd like to focus a little bit on housing. As regular listeners to NPR will know, in my show, The Catch-Up, we understand how housing is an issue. We also understand what the solution is, which is more houses. We need to increase supply. This will affect, obviously, the stock numbers. It will affect house prices. It will affect mental health and social well-being because people have their own houses. And yet houses are not being built.
Houses are not being built, no.
As one voice round a table of 16 potentially, how are you going to ensure that houses are built?
How am I going to ensure houses are going to be built? I think it's about really working with people, finding out where the resistances are and working through them, making sure that the resource consent process is smooth and it's happening, and making sure that people have funding for it, and keeping things like our social housing continuing, because there's currently more being built as we speak, which is really, really good, but we've got to keep that lowest bracket there, because if we start removing things like that lowest bracket of our housing market, our rents will keep increasing.
This is the other thing, isn't it? The development is happening.
It is happening.
And in the private space as well. But they're not the right types of houses. There is no incentive at the moment for developers to build the 1 and 2 bedroom units. They're building 3 and 4 or 5 bedroom houses. How do we incentivise at a local level? Because the government have struggled to incentivise. When you look at things like Kiwi Build, that didn't work. How are we going to incentivise locally?
So I think it's about supporting those people. Gathering demand, because people will build to demand. If there is demand there and that demand is being heard, so it's about bringing voice to that, and I'm prepared to bring voice to that demand to get behind those
Is there a lack of voice around the demand?
I
think a number of organisations in this building alone would tell you that they're shouting loud.
Adding to it, adding to it, giving it another platform, pushing it further.
So I guess you are an advocate for social housing and Papaioia Place, which we are not too far from here at Hancock House.
At all.
The Palmerston North City Council, I'm not going to say is unique, but certainly it's something to be aware of, that its investment in social housing is pretty high up in terms of what other councils are doing.
Yeah, very much so. We are very fortunate to have that investment.
But there are people also in the ratepayer base that would say just focus on roads, which is an issue which Jimmy will likely talk to you about later. Roads, sewer work, stormwater, rubbish collection, those are the things that a city council should be involved in. How would you respond to that?
So we need those things to support our housing. We can't have houses with no way of getting to them or supporting our sewage system or our water supply. We need to work with things hand in hand. We can't have one without the other.
Looking at, obviously, as you say, a Green Party candidate, we can't go past climate crisis and environmental issues. The City Council at the moment is in a situation where it needs to sort its wastewater system. Horizons are watching closely. Central Government watching closely with their Three Waters reform on the horizon. It's a big, complicated picture, but you are, if you're successful in this campaign and election, you'll be around the table when the City Council will likely have to make one of the biggest investments it's made in generations. That's going to be tough in terms of what you've got left over in your rates to pay for other things. What's your thinking around this timeline and how you're going to act over the next 3 years if you're successful? 3 years? 2 years?
2 years, only 2 years. So I think it's really important that we do make these investments. In no way do we need to start pushing these investments back because the situation will only get worse. We are a growing community. Our population is increasing, and so is our urban sprawl. So we need to be investing in our systems to support that.
So I actually, just going back to housing, you say urban sprawl is increasing. Are we needing then with things like, because Papaioia Place always interested me, that why wasn't it, multi-story, why wasn't there more than one level? Accessibility, I appreciate, is an issue for some people that live there, but, there would be ground floor occupancy as well. Do we not need to condense some of our accommodation to counter things like urban sprawl?
So there is a need to increase the density of our housing, moving to more medium density housing, like is going up on Pioneer Highway at the moment. But Papitoetoe Place, with the primary aim of being for the older end of our community, I guess you'd call it, was designed, but is compact.
Yeah.
So they are close together, shared walls.
There is talk in that community that the Papaioia Place community are very proud of where they live now.
As they should be, yeah.
But they don't have a centralised place, like a social hall or some other space. And there's talk of that being part of the development down the line. Is that necessary for social housing?
I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's one of those very nice to have. I think we need to focus on building our community spirit and our strength and strengthening our communities, because when people start working together and they need those places to work together, we strengthen our communities and have better outcomes across the spectrum.
Going back to climate and environmental issues, what is the council not doing, or what should they be doing better to address the climate situation, the environment situation? I'm thinking of, the low-hanging fruit, relatively low-hanging fruit, easy to identify, electrify the entire fleet of vehicles might go some way to addressing it. What do you see are some of the things that the City Council should be doing in that space?
I think we need to be trying to focus on reducing our carbon emissions through our transport system. Really simple way we can get our cycleways up and running properly. I know there's a lot of people out there, and I've heard a lot when I've been door knocking and out in the community, that people really want cycleways that are safe. People don't cycle into the centre of our city because they are worried about the tightness of our roads, the space, drivers. So that sort of thing, like bike lanes and investing in our bus network, making sure our bus network is easy to access and affordable.
The content coordinator of NPR, Hugh Dingwall, will be delighted to hear you say that, as he is a regular cyclist with a number of incidents in his past. So dealing with the wastewater issue, as I say, is a big one. What's your thinking on the government's, and this is where the sort of party politics thing is challenging to differentiate, the government's stance on the Three Waters reform? If the City Council invests in new wastewater treatment and then has to hand that over to central government for monitoring, that's a lot of local money that seems to just disappear, doesn't it?
I don't think it's disappearing. We're still going to get the benefits in our community of having invested in the wastewater system.
But this is something that doesn't just affect Palmerston North, affects a number of areas, but the ratepayers are investing through their rates that could be spent on perhaps more social well-being or infrastructure here, whereas if central government paid for it when they're doing their three water reform, then it comes out of a different pool and maybe we don't feel it so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about where the money comes from, but it doesn't change the problem of it still needs to be done.
Good point. What is your preference for the wastewater upgrade? Because, there was the put it to sea, put it to land, treat it better, and then put it in the rivers. What's your stance on that? Because the Nature Calls consultation had a number of proposed solutions in there, and ranging from reasonable to outlandish prices.
I think I'd need to go and do a little bit more reading on that specifically. I haven't looked at where we're going to be disposing of it, but there is options and our people know and have the answer. So it's about going out to our communities, consultating with those that are involved, especially those that border the river, if that's our option, where it's going on our land, etc., etc.
What's your view on City Council engagement with the community in things like the Nature Calls consultation and other areas where they need to be getting the information out? Do you think it's sufficient, or do you see any gaps there that could be filled? I
think general engagement with just across the board is a little bit disheartening. I think we need to work on getting our community engagement up. If you look at the by-election, for example, we're expecting low voter turnout. And until we start increasing our voter turnout and getting voices heard, we don't really understand what our community wants. So I don't think it's a city council issue on its own. I think it's a greater population issue across New Zealand.
Any ideas on how to do that?
I think it's about bringing it back down to the people, right? We don't just sit in a building and have conversations around the table. We are people out in the community having conversations in our day-to-day lives, and it's about bringing those voices back, but also getting our councillors and our staff and our council buildings out into the community.
Fair enough. Let's turn to Jimmy Ellingham, senior reporter for the Manawatū Standard. He has some questions from NPR listeners and Standard readers.
Yes, thanks, Fraser, and good morning, Vanesa. Can I just return to, if we can, to the social housing? Are you, just to nail you down if you want, and that's not, I don't mean to use that expression, but you know what I mean. On social housing, will you be advocating for more, for the council to be building more social housing?
Yes, very strongly. There is a very large waiting list and we need to work to meet demand.
Do you have an idea of the numbers that could be both affordable, for the council to do this, and that would actually address this demand? Because we're seeing, for example, in the city with state houses, yes, there are more being built, but actually the numbers aren't really going up because there's other ones being decommissioned. So it's not actually, making a dent into that state house waiting list.
So I don't necessarily think it's about just providing a number of houses. I think we need to look at the quality of our houses as well. It's important we're decommissioning the ones that aren't providing families safe, affordable, healthy homes, because we can't keep putting our people in houses that just aren't suitable.
Are you happy with the condition of the social housing at the moment in the city?
Depends where you're looking. If you're looking at like Papatoetoe Place, absolutely wonderful.
It's a brand new one, isn't it? So
brand new, wonderful.
So, yes.
Absolutely. You'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
Some of the older ones, perhaps around, such as the ones not too far from Hancock House. There's the ones near that old bus stop on the street. The name escapes me, but the old bus stop here. Those council houses, those ones built in the 70s and 80s, that sort of thing. What do you think about that?
So I think it's important to address them on a case-by-case basis. I can't just come out and say they all need improvement, but looking at things like making sure they're insulated, making sure they're not drafty, the windows sealed properly, and they're ventilated.
One of the most popular questions from our readers was, in their words, how do you keep rates down? But perhaps to ask a question too is, how do you balance keeping rates down with the spending that you've identified, such as on social housing and the likes of transport options and that sort of thing? How do we strike that balance?
I think it's about ensuring our ratepayers see a value for money. If they can see where their rates are being spent and the value they're getting from them, it's easier to justify the cost of rates, but also I'm understanding that rates are high for some people. For some people, paying rates means not putting food on the table, and for me that's just not acceptable. I think we need to look at our rate system on an overall picture and reassess how we're doing rates, and I know that that's on the council plans. So,
you're supportive of a rates review, if you like.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. The other popular question we had from readers, you've covered a little bit about sustainable transport, but it was about roads. How can you fix our roads, in the words of the people asking our questions? But also, we had some questions about cycle facilities, cycle lanes. Now, you've already spoken about that a bit, but what will you be doing to really push that if you were to be elected?
If I were to be elected, I would be pushing for our roading budget to be spent on our roading and ensuring that the roading work that's being done is of a high quality. Quick patches, they fix the problem in the short term, but often they need refixing in a few months' time. So sometimes covering the whole section is a better option. So investing a little bit more money early on rather than spending it in a couple of chunks. Cycleways, removing them from being right up next to the traffic. We can't continue putting our bikes in between where cars are moving in and out. That's where you get.
I think that's what the council calls buffered cycleways, if you like, which means a gap between them. But also that sometimes we saw down College Street, that created discord, if you like, with locals saying we're losing car parks, we're losing that sort of thing, which gives us access to shops in some cases, or our homes if we don't have off-street parking. What will you do to make sure to mitigate those concerns?
So I think it's about consultation. We need to reach out to those people that are being affected by the changes we're making, ensure that conversations are happening, and then moving forward with changes rather than making changes and then consulting.
And a question we've been asked to ask of all candidates is who nominated you and seconded you?
Who nominated me and seconded me? 2 members of the Green Party.
What were their names?
That was Thomas Austin and Siobhan Stewart.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just going back to one of the answers you gave Jimmy there, I don't know if it was a loaded statement you wanted to unpack, but you said making sure that the roading budget is used for roads. Is there something you want to highlight there? Is it not being used on roads at the moment?
I think it is being used on roads, but I think there is a conception out there that that it's being assigned to roading and then moved elsewhere. So I think it's about making sure that we're being transparent with where our spending is going and where it's being assigned.
Fair enough. Is there anything else in your campaign promises or pledges that you want to take the opportunity to outline to people, or is it really much about, climate, housing? There was a third one, wasn't there? Ensuring
everyone thrives. Yeah, so it's really about making sure that across our community, everyone is able to access the things they need to put food on the table, have a roof over their head, and be happy and healthy.
And do you see things coming up in council decision making that as one voice in 16 you will be able to advocate for and maybe encourage things to happen that will further those aims?
I don't think there's specifics. I think it's about adding to the voices that are working for our people.
Fair enough. Vanesa Rozenberg, running with the endorsement of the Green Party, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's all we have time for in this episode of the MPR and Manawatū Standard By-Election special. Other episodes are available at mpr.nz/show/by-election21, with the series also running during the first week of February, Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. on MPR. It's on 999 AM across Manawatū or via our live stream at mpr.nz. Of course, keep an eye on the Manawatū Standard for further coverage of the candidates, their campaigns, and ultimately the results, which will be announced on the 22nd of February. Remember, your vote must be posted in a DX mailbox or directly to the council by 12 p.m. on Wednesday, the 17th of February, to count in this election. Thank you for joining us. Tēnā koutou.